Have you ever wondered if your leadership approach truly reflects the dynamic and diverse world that we live in today? Well, I'm sure you have because you're not alone. And that's why I wanted to bring this series to you on inclusive leadership, because there are so many aspects to being an effective leader, and we can't all know everything. So I just wanted to share with you some information, some tips and ideas that hopefully you can take away, add them to your toolkit, and use them effectively on your leadership journey. So before I get into all of that, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Roxanne St Clair, and I've been working with senior leaders for, I don't even want to say how long, but I guarantee you it's been a couple of decades. And over that time, I've seen a lot, done a lot. So I've had experience of working in the UK, in Europe, and parts of the Caribbean as well. So I can say that I've worked with quite a diverse group of people. And it's been on this journey that I've realized how important it is that we all embrace inclusivity. So on today's conversation, where we are looking at inclusion, I will be just touching on three particular areas that really impact a leader's ability to work inclusively, so to get all of the team on board, and just some of the issues that are faced for us. So I'll just cover three issues because I know your time is precious and I do not want to keep you too long, but I do want to give you some value so that you can take that away and make that work for you. And then one, obviously, I'm not just going to give you the problems without giving you an idea of some solutions that can also work for you. So let's get started and let's get into this, shall we? So the world is changing so quickly, and we cannot afford to sit back and just let the world go on and think that we'll be okay. We have to be quite proactive nowadays. It's no longer a case of, oh, let's wait and see and hope for the best. We have to put the best in place. But how do we do this when we are faced with a number of different ideas and issues that can impact our ability to actually think and act quickly? So, as I said, I'm just going to touch on three areas today. And the first area that I'm actually going to touch on for you is around the intergenerational workforce. So now, it's probably one of the first times in history we have up to five generations working in one workspace. So you can imagine what that can actually do, where I think we've got almost 100 years worth of experience and knowledge and differences to cope with. So how do we do that? And this is one of the key conundrums, because we have people that are in their mature years, should we say, who's still have a lot to offer. They've been there, they've seen a lot, they've done a lot. They may not be as fast as some of the younger people, but they still have that wealth of knowledge and they're in the workplace. And as we know, people are retiring a lot later, sometimes because of legislation, but other times due to actually necessity or desire, because people no longer feel that once they hit a certain age, they're no longer able to contribute. Some people feel they still got a lot to give and therefore they want to continue working. I know of people in their 80s who are still very, very active. So we can no longer say because a person's hit 60, 65, 67, 70, that they are put out to pasture. They're no longer viable in the workplace, because we're seeing the evidence here with us now that people are working a lot longer, a lot later. So we have those people at one end of the spectrum. Then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got our young people, our teenagers, our Gen Zs, and all the different sort of acronyms we're applying to the different generations now, who are coming into the workforce. And the workforce that they're coming into is very different to the workforce, say, for example, that I knew when I started working. It's a totally different environment. Once you had a job, you were going into an office. Now there are people that have been in roles probably got a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years, and they've not stepped foot in an office. They've not sat down and been in that space with their work colleagues on Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, working with the same people day in, day out. And therefore being able to build up that relationship with their work colleagues in the same way that I know I did, and maybe you did, depending on your generation. Even, I say, if we go back 4 to 5 years, the norm was still to get a job and you had a place of work, unless you were labeled a freelancer or somebody that was specifically recruited to work outside of an office space or outside of a set working space. So we have this younger generation that do not have the same background of work as would have been seen as a traditional working ethic, working environment. So that's two ends of the spectrum. And then we've got those in between. So we've got all of that to contend with now as part of the workforce. And therefore, as you as a leader, how do you deal with all of this? How do you satisfy those senior people that have been used to a particular way of working, have recently had to change and adapt their way of working because the world of work has changed? And then you've got young people who are coming into a work environment who may not have the old structure, the old way of working, but can still be effective and efficient, but choose to work in a different way and cannot see why they should work how, say, senior members have had to work in the past. So you as a leader, you have that to face as well. And as I said, you then got the all the stages in between. So your role has changed significantly. And with that, the responsibilities of being an inclusive leader looks totally different to how it may have looked, say, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we heard the word inclusion. It was more around talking about how diverse are we. But it's changed so rapidly over the last 3 to 4 years that your ability to embrace those changes and be effective in your embracing of the changes is something that you now have to take on board and look at seriously. So that's one of the three issues that we will look at. Then the second one is around cultural differences, because not only have we got up to 5 generations in the workforce, we now have a global workforce within the same space. Whereas traditionally, you may have had one or two people of different cultures in a workspace. Now we can have a multitude of people from a multitude of backgrounds, countries, um, religions, all working together. So with that, that you as the leader, I should say, then have to see, how do you manage that process? How do you get all of these different people with different cultures, different ways of working, different ways of relating to each other to come together and work together to achieve a common goal and to do it effectively? So this is another issue for you as the leader to take on board. And then the third area that I'm going to address with you is around staying motivated, and for yourself as the leader, but also your team staying motivated. How do we do all of this? And I would like to share a story with you, because I can remember, well, this is going back some years again, when I was still working in a corporate environment. I had to travel out to Europe to learn and understand the systems of one of my European counterparts. And the idea was that I would be doing the work on their system, but doing it from the UK. So again, there's a cultural difference, because the way that they worked in that country was very different to how we worked in the UK. So I had to understand that. So even to be trained on their system, I couldn't go into their organization with the same attitude that I would have if I was going into a UK based organization, because I had to respect the culture of the team that I was working with. So, for example, they went out and had proper lunches, and to be a team player, I had to go out to those lunches. And I wasn't the sort of person that drank wine at lunch, but I had to find a polite way of not drinking wine at lunch because I knew it'd make me tired in the afternoon. So it was a polite way of going with a non-alcoholic option, but not insulting the people that I was working with, because that was the part of their custom, as part of their culture. They drank wine at lunchtime with their meal because food was very important to them in a different way. So this was something I had to take on board, and it became actually it's quite interesting because after a few months of going out there to work with the team, they knew me so well because again, I'm particularly in certain types of food that I eat, and more often than not, although I do eat meat, I would go for a fish option. So there was a running joke that the menu came out, and one of my colleagues, he would look at the menu and say, "Oh, there's salmon. Oh, there's this." We'd always find the fish option on the menu and actually tell me that it was there because he knew that I was more likely to go for the fish. Because if I was going to have meat, I like my meat to be well done. And they didn't eat their meat well done. Well done to them is what we at the time would call rare. So this is just an example of a cultural difference, but how we can respect each other's cultures and work together to get towards the goal that we want to achieve. So this was another example. Now, what I do want to touch on is some of the solutions that will go with those challenges that I've just mentioned. So when we spoke about intergenerational workforce, how do we get people to gel and work together? And the primary solution here is by listening to each other and people having that sense of belonging. So it doesn't matter if you're 70, 75, or 18, you're all part of this team and you can all bring something to the table. You can all share your own viewpoint, but it's on you, the leader, to lead by example and show the team what it means to be inclusive. What does it mean to listen to each person's contribution and actually creating the space so each person can contribute? Because sometimes us as leaders, we may have people that are always first to answer, always coming with their suggestions and their ideas, and have quieter members that will just carry on with their work. However, when it comes to meetings, they do not say a lot. How do you, as the leader, encourage them to actually speak up, have their voice heard, and to recognize that you want their voice to be heard? And it's okay for them to let their voice be heard, because this is fundamental, because sometimes it's those people who tend to be the quiet ones who works things out and can come and give you some very insightful and succinct ideas and solutions that can help the whole team and move the team along further quicker. So that's one thing I would say, creating a space with that sense of we listen to each other and the team members feel that they belong and they're a valuable asset within the team. That is one way to work around that, bringing the intergenerational mix together and making it work, because we can all learn from each other. And then when we look at the idea of cultures and multiculturalism, as I've mentioned just now, where you get to know each other and therefore we can respect each other's cultures. And I think in all of this inclusive leadership series, one of the fundamental aspects that will keep cropping up is that about respect, respecting each other, respecting team members. And respecting each other doesn't mean that we're each other's best friends, that we have to like everybody, because let's face it, we're human. But we can respect the person for who they are and for what they contribute. And with this respect, we're more willing to listen, as mentioned before. And then by listening, people do feel that they belong. they feel that sense of belonging. So although they're different, and we know we're all different, but when you feel that you're heard and you belong, those differences do not become a barrier. They actually become something that's quite refreshing, and actually it gives you more because you've got more things to tap into. So if we can respect each other and encourage sharing, then we actually find that we have more to gain, and we have quite, little to lose. We just have much more to gain. And then building on that, we can then start to establish our best practices. What are some of those best practices? Because we may have our own way of being, our own way of thinking. However, when we listen and bring in ideas from others, we can actually modify our own way of thinking and adapt it so that we can have best practices in place that actually help us to achieve the results that we want, not only easier, but quicker, and more often more cost effectively. So that's why it's important to actually have an inclusive team and be seen as that inclusive leader, because you have far more to gain. And let's face it, we'd rather, want to gain. We're living in a society where all of us want to grow and to feel that we're making advancements. So if we can gain by using our best practices, because we're ensuring that our inclusivity of our team is making us more effective. And then finally, when we're looking at the aspect of staying motivated and keeping that motivation going, it sounds simple, but sometimes it's the simple things that we forget. And it's really about focusing on the priorities. Because when we work on our priorities first, then the key things are getting done. So that instilling that focus for everybody. And again, I always say lead by example. How can we ask people to do what we're not prepared to do ourselves? And I find that it works both in the personal life and in the business life. If you're asking people to do something that you would do yourself, you're leading by example, then others can follow suit. So when you have your priorities set, and encourage each member of your team to have their priorities set and to focus on the priorities first, because we can spend and lose a lot of time on things that aren't really our priorities. And then by the time we know it, the time's gone. And as you know, we cannot get time back. So one thing that we spend it, we'll never get it back. So let's make our time effective. So to wrap up on being an inclusive leader and inclusion, we looked at the three areas. How do we bring the variety of generations together to make a contribution? How do we use culture and the variety of cultures that we have to actually give us more so that we can grow and expand and be more innovative, because we can see and find different ways to do things? And then finally, with having all of that, if we focus on our priorities and get those right, that helps us to build a more inclusive team, and it helps us all to work on inclusion, because there's no fear for us as team members, because we know that we all matter. So I hope that you've found today's session useful, that you can take some ideas away, you can implement them, and you can share them with your team so that you can continue to grow and advance. And let's make this time that we have together as a team, as people, as individuals, as progressive and productive as we can, so that we can all know that we've made a difference, we've done what we're here to do, and we can continue to grow and progress. So until next time, take care. And I look forward to seeing you in another session. Do get in touch if you've got any comments or suggestions, or you want to know how you can work with me further. So I look forward to hearing from you, and remember to subscribe. So take care for now.